Yo, goons, what's good? Time for some low effort content. So today, I was watching this video from LK. Really good video, by the way. I would recommend it. Where he talks about the easiest characters, or rather, he rank orders the characters in terms of how easy they are to use, and varying by level of play. Like if you have experience, if you're new to Strive, etc. If you're new to fighting games, in general, it's a good video. I'd recommend it. But it gave me an idea, and so today I figured I would talk about tournament level character viability. Like in a tournament setting, how viable is your character? Because it's a little bit different from how viable characters are overall, I think, or on paper. And in specific, I'm talking about offline setting, like big offline tournaments is what we're going to be talking about today. And naturally, that's going to factor in some really high level play. So with that being said, let's get to the list and let's get into it. All right. So this is my list. It's rank ordered. And basically the characters on the top are the most likely to win a big tournament, and the characters on the bottom are the least likely to win a tournament. So let's just go through it. Let's start at the bottom. So Potemkin, Bedman, Sin, this should be no surprise, but I want to get one thing out of the way here. I'm specifically talking about like NA tournaments more so, but I mean this kind of thing I would stand by in most places across the world, but it not only factors in how strong a character is, but also how strong they are when you consider how popular their characters they play against are, their matchups. Basically, like how well represented are their good matchups and their bad matchups, on top of like what about them changes in a tournament setting, So I'm factoring all that in, and also like I'm trying not to factor in who's piloting these characters, because if I were to do that, then Zato would just be at the top because he has the most top players on him out of any character, so he would naturally be the most likely to win a tournament, I think, statistically, if you're picking one. Granted, you could also make the argument for Soul. Anyway, all that stuff aside, Potemkin, well, while it's true some things benefit him in tournament, like in big offline settings, I can tell you from experience, people really, they tend to play in a polarized way. Most people, right? The majority of people, keep in mind, like 50% of the tournament will go 2-2 or worse. Most people in a tournament, which is not very far, by the way, in a large tournament, most people tend to get either too defensive or too offensive. Like they overly commit or really undercommit a lot in a tournament. And that kind of works in Potemkin's favor a little bit. And also I think people, when they're at home, they're much more comfortable. And they don't realize that some things put a lot more pressure on you than other things. And being in Potemkin's offense is one of those things. Like when there are actually stakes, being in Pot's offense is really scary. But that doesn't offset how bad his matchup spread is, how popular his terrible matchups are in the NA scene. Like, Chipp and Bridget are very prominent characters in the NA. Lots of decent players on them, and a decent Chipp or Bridget can beat the best Potemkins. I'm just going to say that. Like, it doesn't require a player significantly better or even, like, better at all to beat Potemkin in those matchups, even if you're massively better as the Potemkin player. Yeah. In Bedman, I think this one's a little uncertain right now. He's underdeveloped, or they, or whatever. Bedman. Anywho, yeah, I'm really unsure about Bedman, but I just think as it is right now, this character really shouldn't be winning offline tournaments. It shouldn't be happening. Big offline events, these characters, they should not be winning. They absolutely should not be winning, no matter the player. Like a player of any skill level of the existing players in this game shouldn't be winning majors with these characters offline, because it just requires like too much luck, I think, in your bracket. Now, Sin, I think, is actually at the top of this tier because maybe he can. Like, there's some EMEA tournaments. They have a very strong Sin over there. I believe that was in grand finals. Yeah, up against Sainologist. I forget how you say that. Very, very recently, actually. And also Potemkin in top 3, funnily enough. That tournament was pretty funny. But anywho, I wouldn't consider that a big tournament. A big tournament, I'm talking like CEO level or beyond, I would say. Like at least 500 entrants or more. And in those tournaments, yeah, I don't think any Sin has a chance of winning that. He just has too many problems as a character. Too exploitable. Bad matchups are too popular. And also there aren't really enough like super great players piloting him to even be considered a threat. But again, I'm trying not to factor that in. Okay, let's move on. So it requires bracket luck. So I think these characters could win or perform well, but they have to be piloted by an extremely strong player, and they also have to get lucky. Like, all of these characters here, or most of them, have some matchups that are terrible. Again, there's kind of something in common with Bracket Buster, but these characters at least have win conditions and, you know, things that they can force a little more. You know, I think Ino is a little bit above these Bracket Buster characters, but not by much. And we've seen Daru do well, but Daru is like the only Ino doing well out here in tournament. Like, I think this character is still, you know, quite unlikely to win, even if they were piloted by other characters, mostly just because they're a little bit too prone to execution checks in tournament. Like, we saw that at Texas Showdown recently, actually. Like, Dawn just getting execution checked by these Meis, and it's kind of unfortunate, but no, she doesn't have the consistency. That's an issue with a lot of these characters down here. They don't have the consistency of some of these higher up characters, and Ino's a great example of that. Obviously, when she's doing her thing, she's good, but like, there's a burst, multiple bursts every game. You know, there's defensive options from a lot of these stronger characters with more threatening win cons. And while this isn't the same as a tier list, I think that some of Ino's weaknesses really are exacerbated by being in a bracket setting. She just has to take a little bit too much risk for my take, and people won't respect her in a tournament setting. People are less likely to respect the character like Ino in tournament. I'd say Faust isn't as much of a knowledge check as goldlewis. Like, he doesn't punish you quite as hard, but you do need to know how to fight him. And the thing about Faust is he has a very unique style. Like, you need to be ready to play against Faust. If you're not, the Faust players kind of get to do what they want, and that's something to consider, you know. But again, he struggles with some of these really popular characters, and although he's kind of proven, I think that the only way a Faust is going to win a big tournament or perform well or top 8 is if they get good bracket luck, or if they're piloted by a player who's just a lot better than everyone they fought up to get at that point. But in a big tournament, you know, top 8 level, you can't get there without being really, really good or getting pretty lucky. It's a similar story with Testament. Now, I think that Testament, this one is really much more a function of not how they're impacted by tournament setting, but just being kind of a weak character overall. I think Testament has kind of fallen out of favor with a lot of people, you know, pretty much all the top players not really considering this character super good anymore. And also Testament is just very unproven. There are not really Testaments placing well, performing well. And, you know, it's kind of a shame because Testament's sort of cool, but yeah, this character just doesn't threaten you enough in a tournament setting, I would say, compared to everyone else. And that's really what drives him down. So moving on to goldlewis, it's kind of hard to say like exactly how being in a tournament setting impacts him, because I understand that he puts a lot of pressure on people, a lot of mental pressure on people. And it's hard to play against something like that. And also he has this benefit of being a character where if you're very inexperienced in the matchup, as long as you are in a matchup that stomps goldlewis, then he's going to give you a lot of trouble. He's going to punish you hard for being inexperienced. But it's a two-sided coin, well, with goldlewis, because he also gets punished really hard for matchup inexperience and a lack of matchup knowledge. And when you're in a setting where you're running into a lot of matchups, that kind of impacts him, you know, asymmetrically, I would say, especially when you factor in this whole idea of like character popularity. So in NA, at least, like, Chipp is extremely popular. Bridget is extremely popular nowadays. And obviously Nago is as popular as ever. All three of those matchups are at least 6-4. I don't consider myself a goldlewis down player. I think this character is strong. He's a good character. But in a tournament setting, he needs bracket luck to win. He has to avoid those matchups. He has to. Because at most, like, a really strong goldlewis should only be able to go through one of those consistently in a big tournament. Like, if Darkrai ran into Diaphone and Bean and Nubenheimer back-to-back, I would say Darkrai is as good or better than all of those players at the very least. But I don't think that there's any universe where he could beat all three of them back-to-back. And that kind of thing happens all the time. You know, there's just too much that can go wrong with these characters, and goldlewis is a great example of that. And his polarizing matchups, his good matchups, are against these characters, these weaker tournament characters. So it doesn't really matter as much. You don't even see them as represented as his worst matchups, and that's really what drives him down. If we lived in a universe where these characters were popular, then it would be great. But I mean, that applies for everyone. If characters that were weaker in tournament were more popular, other characters would do better in tournament, you know? So that's just something to consider. and this applies to everyone in this tier, but the opponent having matchup inexperience against you, rather, like inexperience really helping you win with respect to characters in this tier, that's a component of bracket luck. Like, how likely is it that your opponent is not going to be very experienced against your character? If your win con is really dependent on that fact, then that's what drives characters into this tier. And I think that applies to Anji a lot. Like, you need to run into people that aren't experienced to perform super well with Anji. Because honestly, although a good Anji will mental stack you, although a good Anji, can put you under pressure, and they have mix-ups like, other Anjis don't have. Adventure I'm thinking of here is a great example of this sort of thing. He fundamentally, will take some risks on its offense. IB is very strong against him. Many characters can react and punish Needle. And, of course, the overhead is not at all a free reaction, but it is definitely within, it is reactable. It's within the realm of reality to react to that. And I think that if all your characters' threats and mix-ups are reactable, it's kind of an issue. But this character has the benefit of being pretty consistent, I would say, actually, compared to everyone else in this tier. And I think that's what drives him up, really. He is a strike thrower, and fundamentally, that's a very good game plan in a tournament setting. I think strike throw is great in tournament, especially if you're against someone who's very good at doing it and enforcing the options, and his reward has gotten a lot higher over time. And as such, we've seen Anjis make some big upsets in this season and perform really well. So I don't think this character is great in tournament, and I don't think he can win without tournament luck, but I don't think it's impossible. Now to get into the next tier, skill gap dependent. So I think that these are characters that you don't necessarily need bracket luck to win with, but if you're winning, it's usually because you kind of need to be the better player. Not dramatically so like you do with these characters. With these guys down here, right, like you can be the better player. There can be a skill gap, but if you don't get lucky and run into your good matchups, it doesn't matter. Like goldlewis, I'm going to go back to him as an example here. You can be way better than a Chipp or Bridget player. You honestly can. You can be a lot better than Chipp and Bridget player, and you can still lose to them, right? But with these characters here, I think they're a little more consistent, where most of the time they can stabilize as long as they're the better player. And, in the case of Millia, that's because she legitimately does have a very good win condition and very good neutral. And if you're the better player and you have way better neutral and you're with punishing the opponent slobbering all the time, you're going to win. You're going to mix them to death. And I think she has access to that a little better than these guys down here. And also, it's quite threatening, her win condition. Same with Kai. His win condition isn't quite the same as Millia's, but he's a better all-arounder than those characters below him. And he's a great strike thrower. People are growing on Kai. And in tournament setting, I think that, being an all-arounder is really good. It's really good, but I think his lack of threat is what keeps him from being on the level of some of the other characters above him, but he's very solid. These characters in this tier, they can win, right? If a very good player is at a tournament on these characters, and they just happen to be better or run into decent matchups, they can win. They can definitely win. And we've seen good performance, actually, from all of these characters at majors. We have. I'd say out of these ones, Millia and Baiken are probably the least proven, but they're still, doing decent out here. Axel, of course, on the other hand, is very proven, and there's a lot of evidence that this character is perhaps better than I'm rating him in tournament. And a lot of people have downplayed Axel this patch. I just want to stress this again. This is not a tier list. This is a how likely is this character to win a big tournament list, okay? It's not the same as, like, who's the best and who's the worst characters. Although they're correlated, they're not the same thing. And in Axel's case, I think that's a big one, because he is a solid character. He's a great character even, but in tournament, I think he's not buffed and he's not nerfed. If anything, he's maybe a little bit buffed by tournament setting just because he's hard to play against. He's really a patience test, and he punishes nerves a lot. Like, little mistakes add up a lot against Axel over time. But the thing is, Axel gets punished really hard for mistakes as well. He gets punished really, really hard. He can lose off of one mistake to some of these other characters, and being in tournament, that affects things. But in the end of the day, it kind of stabilizes to him being average-ish in tournament setting, I would say. And, that's not bad. Baiken. So Baiken is kind of borderline with the serious threats tier, and I just want to say now that there's a bit of a divide, I'd say, between these two tiers, but these two tiers are closer. Like, requires bracket luck and skill gap dependent. there's a bit of a gap between them, but between serious threats and skill gap dependent, there's not as much of a gap. Just to get that out of the way. Okay, and baiken is a good example of that because baiken has an extremely threatening, easy to access, consistent, easy to execute game plan. Those are all the pluses you can want in a character. 4-framer, really good defense with parry. The only thing that this character kind of lacks is that their neutral and whiff punish game is not very good. And in a setting where people play much more polarized, where their neutral can be kind of telegraphed, having the ability to punish that or play around it and benefit from it is really a big thing. And the fact that you don't get good whiff punishment, really, it does not feel good with this character. But that's offset by the fact that your win condition is so threatening, so oppressive, so strong. You know, the fact that you can win off of just a throw alone, an entire round can be over off of one throw with baiken. That is a big plus. Big plus, okay? But yeah, she's just not quite as consistent, I would say. So serious threats, right? These are characters that I think we shouldn't be surprised to see winning majors, right? Like, it's totally feasible, and the only reason it really hasn't happened yet, I think, is a matter of sample size or top player representation on these characters in our region. Like, I think specifically that last one applies a lot to Gio and Jacko. Don't have enough top players on those characters, but they're definitely strong enough to do it, in my opinion. So let's talk about Gio for a sec. I already mentioned that strike throw is a very, very solid game plan in tournament. Gio also has a very strong neutral, highly rewarding strike throw, and in a setting where people really get overly offensive or overly defensive, especially in their defense, that benefits Gio big time because she gets paid out hard for both of those, especially with the chip damage change. And she's just very stressful to play against. I actually fought a pretty solid Gio at Frosty Faustings, and it was stressful, man. This character is, you know, really is hard to play against right now, especially if you get punished for your mistakes and you lose half your HP off of with punish 5H super. Yeah, Gio's really good. And I think what differentiates her from the skill gap dependent tier is that she really, you know, doesn't really need to gap, and her matchup spread is just a lot better. I think that her matchup spread is great. She's a very well-rounded character, and that's what pushes her above. So to talk Jacko, right? She has many of the qualities of these characters in the requires bracket luck tier. Like, she has some very bad matchups, and she preys on matchup experience. The thing about Jacko is that she doesn't require luck to run into someone with inexperience, because the vast majority of people in a tournament setting don't have good experience against Jacko. The vast majority of them. There were lots of upsets in air quotes here because, you know, Strive is a very competitive game, but there were lots of upsets at Frosty from some really strong Jacko players out there, and they're performing very well with her. This character's tech is always getting developed, ongoing improvement with this character. That's good that you can always, you know, bring something out between tournaments. And she's just got a very threatening win con. It's very dangerous, and she can loop you in it if you're not ready for it. There are all kinds of resets with this character. So many knowledge checks. And on top of that, her matchup spread is solid, even if she is a little bit polarizing against some characters. Yeah, I think that Jacko can do it, and I think it's only a matter of time before we see some really high placements from Jackos in the future. She's not helped by the fact that she's not really represented because she's kind of a weird character that requires a lot of effort. Unlike Soul. So, Soul is so good. Soul is so good in a tournament setting, and I think people are coming around to understanding this character is good anyway, but one reason why he's so strong in tournament is that he has perhaps the best strike throw game out there of anyone, except May, of course. But you know, he punishes mistakes really hard. It's not hard to get his offense going. He's got great defense, great neutral, and great offense. I mean, what more could you want? The only thing that, you know, given that fact, is keeping this character from being among the best is, I think, the fact that he's just not quite pushed as far in one or more of those categories as other characters. Like, some of these guys compromise the defense that Soul has, but their win conditions are significantly more threatening than his. Chaos is a good example of that, in my opinion. Like, also, you know, Soul is not an easy character to play. If you really want to get perfectly consistent with this character, you need to move past layer 1. You need to move way past it. Get good at catching fuzzy timings. Get good at actually whiff punishing, recognizing spacing, using all your tools properly. It's not that easy. But That being said, I think the payoff is enormous with this character. You've seen it. This is by far the most dominant character in Seoul or in Asia. Might as well call it Seoul because there are so many over there. But in any case, I think we're going to be seeing more Souls in EMEA. We're going to be seeing more Souls in NA in the future. People are coming around to this character. He's great. Bridget. Oh, oh my god. I'm #1 Bridget hater world. I hate this character. She's super cheap, but I tried not to let that influence my opinion here. So, this character is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting because I'd say, unlike most of the characters I mentioned, except maybe one or two, she makes you actually guess in your offense. Now, a great Soul, a great Geo, a great any character will make you actually guess. That's how it works. But she literally forces you to guess. Forces you to hold two 50-50s on your knockdown. She has a DP. She has a disgusting backdash, incredible neutral. She has the benefit of being able to do something at all times in neutrals. Same with Jacko. Like, that's a big plus in tournament. She can always threaten setting up the yo-yo, always threaten scooter spacing with meter. Jacko can always threaten pulling minions and whatnot. That's a big plus. You know, that basically swings the neutral in your favor in a tournament setting where people are very nervous. You always have something reliable. That's great, right? She has easy bake with punishment. She gets her win condition off of her Abare. The only reason this character isn't the best in the game is her damage output. That is literally the only reason, right? Like, I think even with her existing HP, she could be the best in the game if her damage output were like 25% higher. And in a tournament setting where, you know, you might mess up here and there, the opponent getting multiple bursts could screw you. It slightly pushes her down from where she would be. Slightly, okay? This character is great, but she cannot just explode you for one mistake. It's a slow death after one mistake, but still kills you off one mistake, and that's why she's a serious threat. And, like, this character is so consistent. Yeah, she's just so good. And we have a lot of players piloting Bridget in NA, and Frosty was a great first example of there being tons of Bridgets out there that can come to big tournaments and perform well. And I'm sure we're going to see more in the future. Let's talk about Nago. So, Nago... Yeah, the thing with Nago, even though he's been nerfed a lot, right? Even though he's probably the hardest nerfed character in Strive's history, and he really does get punished for mistakes right now, his offense is just that good. He has the most rewarding strike throw in the game, period. You know, more than Mei, more than Chipp, more than Soul, more than anyone, I would say. You know, more than anyone. And I know I said except for Mei earlier with respect to Soul, but Nago definitely is better because he will explode you, absolutely explode you on normal hit. And if he gets the command grab, of course, Bite is the most rewarding command grab in the game. Heals him, does a good amount of damage, can break off of it with meter, and of course, he gets all his blood back, which means that he basically forces you to hold, like, God knows how long of a block string if he even wants to make it gapless or true or whatever, or low risk. And he's generating meter in the process from which he can threaten another strike throw. Yeah. So strong. The thing about Nago is that no matter who you're playing against, his offense is disgusting. Every player in the world will get 50-50 vortex by this character to death on knockdown. Like, his offense is just too strong. And that's what pushes him up so much. And also, I think that he's pretty consistent, too. His game plan is pretty consistent. Again, like Chipp, he invalidates a ton of these lower characters. 5k is great. Again, I don't need to explain what makes these characters great individually, but I'm just saying in a tournament setting. In a world where people get too defensive or take too many risks, he destroys you for either of those. So that makes him really good. All right, moving on to Ram. On that note, extremely consistent character. Easy bake, burst bait, easy bake combos, relatively easy execution. However, if you want to, get the maximum payout, get the good meter build, get the good combos, this character is kind of hard to pilot. But I think that Rams, I think they believe they're working a little harder than they actually are a lot of the time, because having those S buttons, having that ground speed, having that much reward on strike means that your command over neutral is ridiculous. Honestly, in terms of pure neutral game, I think that Rem and Chipp have pretty comparable neutrals. The only thing that you have to factor in is that Chipp gets a lot more off of it. Like on block, he gets way better pressure. If he gets a knockdown, unless it's in the corner, he's going to have better pressure and meter generation. But just in terms of buttons and speed and what you can throw out and threaten, yeah, Ram's really good. And, you know, the fact that you put your opponent in the corner where they have to take an unfavorable guess, basically, or if they hold it, you generate a ton of meter. That's really good for her. It means she has access to a consistent win con that is pretty easy to execute. And again, those are very big pluses in a tournament setting. That's why she's so strong. I mean, I don't need to explain why Ram is strong in tournament, right? We all know this. We all know this, okay? So let's move on. All right, Zato down players. Time for an L. So I hate how people downplay this character, but this is perhaps the most proven character in the world. Zato, I'm curious if you do the statistical breakdowns on this, because obviously things were different in Season 1. Like Nago and Ram were a lot stronger than Zato, Mei and Chaos, etc. But like, nonetheless, this character might have the most top 8s. Might have the most top 8 placements, not just as a function of GOATs piloting him, even though that is definitely a thing. Like, try not to be balanced by the fact that there are many top players on Zato. He's really, really good. He's really, really good. Now, he doesn't have the same neutral oppression factor, I would say, as Chipp and Ram and Zato, and Nago rather, where he's like constantly threatening you of just getting screwed if you get hit in neutral. He doesn't really work that way. His buttons in neutral don't do much, but the trade-off is that like his offense is so scary. Actual 50-50s back-to-back, highly rewarding full combos. You know, his combos are mix-ups with damage. That's what puts him above Bridget, in my opinion. Even though he does have a little bit worse of a matchup spread, I just think that this is probably going to be my most controversial placement of any character on this list. I don't really care if Zato players think I'm stupid for this, because they downplay. But in any case, yeah, how many Zatos have there been that just absolutely pop off with this character and gap what they will often call like unwinnable matchups or 6-4 matchups? I find that Zato happens to win his quote 6-4s a lot more than other characters win their 6-4s. I find that kind of interesting in tournament. And the reason why is because it can kill you off one mistake. And mistakes happen in tournament more than they do normally. Okay? And that benefits Zato like crazy. Like crazy. He's super scary. These characters in this tier, these are the ones that I would bet on winning a tournament. Like, if you just gave me these 5 characters, or I could, you know, let's say I could pick 5 characters out of everyone here, and I could, like, put money on whether or not one of those 5 characters takes the tournament, you're taking at least 3 of them from this tier. 100%. And Chipp could be one of them, right? Even though this is ordered, this tier was very hard to order, I would say. Now, I think the higher we get, the more correlated this is with actual character strength overall, compared to just in tournament setting, okay? So let's talk about Chipp for a second. I think that there's a very good argument that Chipp is top 3, and some people, some very reputable people, even argue that he's top 1. That's a discussion for another day. But in tournament, there's no doubt that having low HP and the possibility of dying for one mistake is a big drawback. A big drawback, right? But bear in mind that Chipp is like incredibly oppressive. He can actually on-react whiff punish things that no other character can, like he can. He has the best neutral in the game. One of, if not the best offenses in the game. Amazing meter generation, amazing consistency, pretty good matchup spread, actually a great matchup spread. And especially against some of these more popular characters, he does really, really well. And that's very good. That's a very big plus for being able to win a tournament, is how well you do against the more popular and the stronger characters in the NA scene. Chipp happens to be one that is really very good for that kind of thing. Not only that, but he just puts so much stress on you. It's so hard to play against this character, man. He just invalidates so many lesser characters. Like, not only does he do decently against the strong characters, but the fact that he doesn't have to worry at all, basically. Like, anyone below serious threats, most characters down there, he basically doesn't have to worry about. Like, he does not have to care about those matchups. You can be a much worse player and win almost all of those as Chipp, just because of how dangerous he is. Even if there's this added threat of you dying in like a couple hits, right? But that's a played out conversation. You know, talk about one that I don't want to have in this video, is the fact that low health is being, you know, an actual drawback. It definitely is in a tournament setting, you know, where you might be more likely to mess up than you are at home, which I think is true for everyone. But obviously, characters with lower health get punished harder than that compared to others. But that being said, there are other things to factor into how hard you're being punished. Like, even though Chipp might lose a higher percentage of his HP than goldlewis does when they mess up, it's way harder to mess up with Chipp than it is with goldlewis. And that's just how it is, you know, in neutral, in defense, in everything. And that's why he's such a strong character right now. Happy Chaos. So I want to get this out of the way before explaining myself on his placement. Yes, Chaos does have some drawbacks in a tournament setting. High execution is a drawback in a tournament setting, but it is a double-edged sword. I think this is something that the Chaos players often don't understand. You know, and they'll say, oh, man, my character is so much weaker in tournament. Give me credit. This is the hardest character to play. Yeah, I would say Chaos is the hardest character to pilot. I think most people can agree on that. It's also very hard to play against. It is incredibly difficult in a tournament setting to have the presence of mind to understand how to defend against this character, how to punish all of his bullshit, you know, how to not let him get away with free resource management and that kind of thing. The trade-offs are not enough to justify Chaos being any lower than this, in my opinion. Any lower than this. I think I'm even being generous not putting him in skull emoji and putting him in this tier, just to get that out of the way. Yeah, this character is disgusting. Insane, highly rewarding mix-ups that can just lead you to a wall break from anywhere. Full combos off of a bare. No, yeah. He's stupid. He's stupid. Again, we all know this. We all know Chaos is a disgusting character, and I don't really need to explain it in all that much detail, I think. Great normals, great neutral. Again, like Bridget, like Jacko, he can threaten something in neutral all the time. Actually, like pretty much, you know, any of these characters on the upper end. He's constantly playing the game in neutral, and that's really good for him. Where other characters are just trying to get in or do something, you know, that they can end up being a little more telegraphed than him. That's great, and he forces you to just play around so much, you know? And there's so many guesses you take with this character. And also, of course, he has slump loops. Like, he has relatively consistent access to a disgusting win condition. How many times have we seen tournament sets basically end because someone gets slumped and they take, like, probably over 300 damage a lot of the time, between from when they started getting slumped and when they actually die. Yeah, that's really stupid, okay? Don't downplay this character just because there are some strong ones out there. He's dumb, even though he is hard to play. Like, again, I just want to really emphasize this. It's a double-sided coin, okay? The execution alone being hard does not justify placing him lower because of how hard it is, especially in a tournament setting where you're stressed and you don't have as much, you know, room in your brain to be consciously thinking about things as you're at home because you don't autopilot as much, or, you know, you have to think of things more consciously. What he does to you is just as hard to deal with, if not harder, okay? Skull emoji. These characters, Leo and Mei. So, the number one reason why these characters are up here is consistency. I'm just going to get that out of the way. Consistency and ease of use. Big pluses in a tournament. And when they don't have any drawbacks on their offense, really, that's what puts them all the way up here. Now, again, for like the 10th time, I want to say this is not a viability tier list. This is a how likely is your character to win tier list at a big tournament. Okay? Because Leo and Mei, I think there's a big divide between them in terms of how strong the characters are. But I think that Leo, if you're the better player with Leo, most of the time you're winning. Like, he doesn't have a single matchup that I would categorize as like really bad. I would say he doesn't have anything that's even in the realm of Bridget goldlewis, like to give an example, because I play that character for reference. But and that's really nice. The fact that you're not really worrying about running into any truly terrible matchups is great. Like, even some of these, all these characters down here, some or all of them, really have at least like one or two matchups where they struggle quite a bit in. I would say Leo still kind of struggles with Nago, and, you know, I'm sure there are others that give him some trouble. But, like, the DP, bro. I know that's kind of a simplistic approach, but when people mess up offense as much as they do in tournament, as much as they do offline where the pressure is high, having that DP and being able to get back turn off of it and being able to win off of a throw, That's just so good and such a big increase to consistency that I think he makes it all the way to the top in tournament. And again, one of the most proven characters out there. He's done so well, so many different events on so many different top players playing him. Leo is a menace, absolute menace. And the best character in the game as well as in tournament, in my opinion, Mei. So, Mei is, to use a Twitter term, unfumbleable. How do you mess up with this character? Actually, how? Because every S Dolphin is pretty much a favorable guessing game. All you have to do is get an S Dolphin out. She destroys you on strike or throw. Her command grab is burst safe in the corner for God knows why. Cranks the risk. You know, very solid movement on this character. Amazing matchup spread. And automatically burst safe combos, pretty much. That is massive. Massive. You know, automatic burst safety and Mei's burst safety, that is such a big deal in tournament. Because again, people make mistakes in tournament. Like I can't count the number of sets I've seen go away that it shouldn't have gone because of burst. Because of someone making a mistake and someone gets a gold burst or a regular burst and they end up winning. Happens all the time. Now, not only can Mei not really make mistakes because her game plan is so easy, but you also can't really burst her. So you factor both of those things in on top of having an extremely strong character, and you get someone who's disgusting in tournament. Absolutely disgusting. And again, I think the only reason we are not seeing Mei's win like a ton of events, A, kind of lack of sample size, there aren't a lot of events right now, B, lack of top player representation. I think that, in my opinion, Slash is absolutely by far and away, by far the best player piloting Mei in the world. I don't think there is anyone even remotely close to his level out there. And I think that there are players that are, you know, comparable to Slash skill-wise, but they're just not out here playing Mei. Especially in NA, except maybe Tempest, I think, is dabbling with Mei a little bit again. Wisely so, I would say. But, I mean, he also plays Leo, so not like the necessity is really there for that. But in any case, yeah, Mei's a massive threat. Like, if we had more top players on her, she would be winning a ton of shit right now. I firmly stand by that for all the reasons I've mentioned. But yeah. That's going to be it for this one. I know this was a bit of an opinionated video. I am honestly not a super opinionated person when it comes to Strive, so I will say there's a lot of room for moving things around on this list, a lot of room for debate. Obviously, I'm a biased person, but I just thought it was interesting to talk about. So let me know what you think, Goons. I read every comment. But again, I'm talking about a tournament level here, so this is not a tier list, okay? Not a character viability tier list. It's going to become a meme when I'm saying that so much. Anyway, that's all for this one, Goons. I don't know when my next upload is. God send me now. God send. See you later.